Insightful journeys aren't always straight lines. They're secrets unfolding one question at a time. Welcome to the Constraint or Catalyst podcast by Banyaga Castillo, Gregorio, Ekis, and Wise.
Hello and welcome to our podcast on the history and philosophy of science education. I'm Dems, your moderator, and thank you for joining us. Now, today's topic is a fascinating one, the handmaiden of faith. To what extent did religious institutions accelerate or perhaps stifle scientific progress in the medieval age? This episode is entitled Constraint or Catalyst, examining faith's role in medieval science. Here's how we'll move through it. First, we'll clarify what we mean by religious institutions, looking at both Christians and Islamic contexts. Then, we'll explore how these institutions actually accelerated science through schools, libraries, endowments, observatories, and even practical needs. After that, we'll face the other side of the coin, how they stifled science with bans, doctrinal limits, and disciplinary controls. Before we dive in, let's do some quick introduction, just briefly on who you are and the perspective you're bringing in.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Robert Boyle. My work centered on experiments and the idea that matter is made up of tiny particles, which we call corpuscular view. I'll be reflecting on how faith and institutions sometimes gave structure to organize the experiment, sometimes limited it, and how science built on those medieval foundations.
Hello, everyone. I'm Annalise Mayer. I study medieval scholasticism, so the mix of theology, philosophy, and natural inquiry. So I'll point out where the church enabled learning and where it set boundaries.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charles Homer Haskins. I wrote about the Renaissance of the 12th century, and I will explain how monasteries, cathedrals, schools, and universities accelerated learning and scientific study.
Assalamualaikum. I am glad to be here. I am Ebony Al-Hitham, and I studied light and vision using controlled tests. And tonight, I will show how Islamic endowments, or what we call waqf, and learning culture enabled optics and observation and where pressures appeared.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. All right, so when we say religious institutions, we're really talking about places, rules, and funding that tie learning directly to faith communities. In Christian Europe, that meant monasteries like the Monte Cassino, cathedral schools, and universities such as in Paris and Oxford. Monks and clerics ran scripturia that copied texts, cathedral schools, trained clergy, and universities created degree paths in arts, medicine, law, and theology. Meanwhile, in the Islamic world, you had madrasas and mosques, schools funded by Waqfa, which are endowments. Rulers operated observatories such as the Maraghi in the 13th century, other than Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, where scholars conducted astronomical observations, and of course, don't forget, libraries and translation connected to courts and scholars. So, with that frame in mind, how did these institutions actually accelerate science? Hoskins,
Yes.
let's start with universities.
Okay.
Say in Paris, Oxford, structured degrees, lectures on logic, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. How did that accelerate science?
Well, thank you for that question, Mr. Moderator. The university really regularized learning, and students moved step by step from the arts, where they studied topic and basic math and astronomy, to advanced study. You had a commentaries on Aristotle physics and on the heavens. The structures actually created as a stable pipeline of trained people. For instance, at Oxford, the Merton calculators developed the mean speed theorem for acceleration. That's direct gain from having classrooms. even syllabi, and peers to work with.
Oh, thank you, Hoskins. How about you, Mayor? Toledo and other centers brought in Aristotle, Ptolemy, and Arabic optics. How did that change what students could do?
Oh, definitely it multiplied the possibilities. So Euclid's geometry and optics, Ptolemy's astronomy, and Alhaithm's optics, all of these became teachable in Latin. So suddenly, no, a student in Paris could model planetary motions or test refraction because the text and diagrams were available. So it wasn't yet modern science, no, but it created conceptual tools and methods already.
Yeah, thank you. How about Al Haytham? In the Islamic world, Waqfa and ruler support. How did they make patient science possible?
Hmm. Well, you know what? That's actually a nice question. And in Islamic world, Waqfa paid for teachers, students, and books. Also, the rulers founded observatories like Maragha, the one you've mentioned earlier, where
Okay.
teams recorded planet position for so many years. And for me, it meant time and space to test light, camera obscura, reflections, refractions, and that built a mathematical theory of vision, which are tied to several experiments.
Oh, thank you, Al Haytham. Mayor, the scholastic method, question, objection, reply, trained reasoning, and natural theology said a rational creator made an orderly world. Can you give us a concrete link to science?
So yes, in a disputation, you had to state a claim. So you raise objections and answer them. So that habit carried into natural philosophy. For instance, if light bends at a boundary, why? So what evidence shows it? So natural theology also framed order as something discoverable, and that gave moral support to measuring and modeling.
Oh, thank you, Hoskin. Sorry, Mayor. How about you, Hoskin? Faith needed accurate time for liturgy and prayer, calendars for Esther or Easter, and geometry for sacred architecture. One concrete case, please.
Okay, one concrete, Mr. Moderator, is by Richard of Wallingford. Okay, he was a monk abbot, designed a sophisticated astronomical clock to track the heavens. And Esther Computus forced better astronomy, and the faith itself practiced pulled to theory rather, an instrument making ahead, according to William Wallingford.
Oh, thank you.
Nice.
So let me wrap up our discussions. Um, so we mean that faith institution accelerated science by building classrooms, supplying texts, funding study work, training reasoning, and dating accuracy. Now, let's face the limits. Before we discuss limits, let's pause for a historiography check. The conflict thesis, religion versus science, became popular among writers such as A.D. White. In contrast, Dohem argued that the continuity thesis that medieval studies prepared the way for later science. Quire shifted attention to a metaphysical revolution in the 17th century, from teleology, purpose and nature, to mechanical philosophy, matter in motion, and efficient causes. So let's briefly name the biases and frames we need to avoid.
All right. So, yeah, beware polemical language like degeneracy or unprosperous because it hides real evidence of study.
To add, to Mayor, it also separate the theory talk for practice. Especially the medievals often did experiments even if the theory sounded very strict.
All right. So, well, I personally believe or think that a constructivist or contextual lens really helps. For example, institutions shape inquiry, and experiments will show method in different action.
Well, as for me, we should be able to track both methods and views to understand the change. Mr. Moderator.
All right, so now let's flip the coin. We've seen how faith institutions accelerated science, but they also set limits. I'll throw out some concrete cases, and I'd like each of you to explain how they restricted inquiry and what happened next. Mayor, let's start in Paris. Earlier in the 1200s, parts of Aristotle's work were banned. And in the 1277, certain philosophical claims, such as the eternity of the world, were condemned. How did that stifle or redirect the study?
Mhm. Well, it definitely restricted teaching and warned scholars to tread carefully. But here's the twist. It also forced new approaches. For instance, the necessity of a certain Aristotelian claims was challenged, which opened spaces to imagine alternate models. So some historians even argue that this helped later moves away from the strictly Aristotelian cosmos.
Okay, how about you, Haskins? Doctrinal lines, things like possession, divine action, the soul, and the world's age shaped what could be studied. What's a practical effect you'd point to?
To answer your question, Mr. Moderator, I think teacher had to praise ideas very carefully, and you could study motions and optics pretty well. And to avoid you in a metaphysical claims that clash with doctrines. That slows some discussion, yes, but it also sharpened the quality of the arguments. And I think scholars learn precisions because they had to.
Okay, how about you, Al Haytham? In Islamic lands, Greek style philosophy and position came under scrutiny. What kind of pressure did scholars face and what continued safely?
Well, I actually remember that one. In that debate, it was emphasized that philosophy could really face critique for overreach, especially
Mhm.
when it seemed to challenge theology, meaning it extended or goes beyond its legitimate scope. But mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and optics often continued safely, especially when tied to practical needs, for example, in timekeeping, navigation, or even law. So inquiry didn't stop there, it just shifted its focus.
Okay, Mayor, give us
Mhm.
one concrete limit in practice,
All right,
please.
so yeah, alchemy was often targeted as fraudulent or dangerous, and astrology was policed. So inside religious orders, rules of obedience, right, could delay writing. Okay, as they mentioned, no, writing or block certain topics. So these are what historians call institutional externalism rules that shape who can say and what and when. Mr. Moderator.
Okay, um, how about Boyle? Balance the picture for us. Were there clerics doing real science inside the system?
Absolutely. Like for example, Theodoric of Freiburg, who is a Dominican, explained the rainbow with prism-like experiments. On the other hand, Albertus Magnus studied natural history. Nicole Oresme, who is a bishop, advanced the mathematics of motion and even the practice of graphing. Jean Buridan developed impetus theory. So yes, limitations exist, but inquiry was alive and well inside the system.
Okay, all right. So let me wrap up your discussions on this matter. So the limits came in the form of bans, doctrinal lines, suspicion, and discipline. But the record shows that many scholars worked productively within those systems that you've mentioned earlier, finding ways to keep inquiry moving forward. All right, so let's put this all together. One case each. Then your verdict. Helped, hindered, or should we say mixed? And give us a concrete example. How about you, Haskins?
I think one concrete example is the universities like Paris and Oxford help overall. Without church-based universities, I think there's no stable pipeline of trained scholars. Just look at the Oxford Merton School developing accelerated math. That's a direct product of the system.
All right. So for me, the 1277 condemnation. So as for me, mixed. Okay. Why? Because they restricted certain claims. Yes, but by denying necessity, they nudge scholars to propose new models beyond strict Aristotelianism. So limits, but also openings. So mixed for me.
Okay. And in the Islamic world, optics and timekeeping, well, it is evident that it helped overall. The needs for calendar and prayer time supported astronomy and observation. Additionally, my camera obscura and refraction tests fit well within valued practice.
Well, we noticed that from the previous answers of my colleagues here, we know that experimental science didn't just appear out of nowhere. It grew from medieval habits, from logic, careful methods, and university life. To move faster, people needed more collaboration, publishing of their outputs, and open debate. So we can say that those skills were learned in the medieval period, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, so you all mean to say that faith-based institutions were both accelerator and brake.
Mm-hmm.
They built on the road and set the speed limits. So net effect, mixed but productive.
Yes.
Now we've just weighed the net effect um, of how faith-based institutions acted both as accelerators and brakes. So let's model a brief scholarly exchange. Please use precise terms and please keep it respectful.
Okay, so I'd like to be the first, Mr. Moderator.
Okay.
Calling medieval science unprosperous is really just rhetoric. It overlooks the optics, experiments, and the mathematical kinematics that is already underway, like the Merton calculators at Oxford. Those are clear signs of progress during that time.
I agree. And if we take a constructivist lens, we see that institutions and doctrine didn't simply block inquiry, right? So they shaped the very questions scholars could ask, and the way conclusions had to be framed. And that's a more nuanced picture for me.
Yes, exactly. From an externalist perspective, universities, religious orders, and endowments both accelerated and regulated inquiry. The dual role explains why the outcome looks mixed. So the structures and constraints, but also continuity and growth.
Yes, that's right. Furthermore, when we separate rhetoric from practice, the continuity becomes clearer. The methods, control tests, and logical reasoning were already in place. What shifted later was the worldview, from teleology to mechanical philosophy.
Very well said. Thank you all for your insightful discussion and argument. So here are our takeaways on this matter. All right. So let's wrap this up. So we mean to say that faith built the classroom. Monasteries, cathedral schools, and universities housed science. Faith also shaped the rules. Theology and scholastic methods set boundaries, sometimes slowing, sometimes sharpening. Faith also funded tools like the Wakfa, the libraries, the observatories, and practical needs supported astronomy and optics. Revolution with roots, later science grew from medieval skills and structures, then scaled and freed them. Thank you to Greg as Robert Boyle, Sandy as Annalise Mayer, Carl as Charles Homer Haskins, Shallow as Evan Al Haytham, and of course, thank you, our listeners. I'm Dem. Thanks for listening. New knowledge often has old roots and sometimes old rules. See you next time.
See you next time. Thank you for inviting us, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Moderator.
so much.
Thank you, everyone. Until next time.